Nothing is more important to the success of a startup than the first 10 engineers you hire. That's why I started First 10. Hi, I'm Boris Epstein, CEO of First 10, and with me is my colleague,
Alexis Munger. Hi. At First 10, we work with early founders to help build early engineering teams.
And this is the First 10 podcast, where we bring you valuable insights on building early engineering teams from all sides of the equation. Engineers, founders, even investors. On today's episode of the First 10 podcast, we're talking to Andrew Munn. I thought that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
What really jumped out to me from that is his compare and contrast from big companies to startups. Like first he was making big companies sound like the place to be because they're predictable and stable and have all of these kind of like great, qualities and attributes about them.
Yeah.
And then startups were contrasted as being, chaotic and uncertain and working kind of crazy hours and all that stuff. But then he kind of flipped it and he's like, no, like a startup with high density of talent can do incredible things and can make a real, dent at what, big companies are doing. He made early startups sound really exciting. Also, I learned that talent could be bought with a steak dinner.
Yeah. I mean, who knew it was that easy? I feel like we got to go back through like all of our outreach templates and just add a PS.
Yeah. Who wants a steak dinner?
A lot of people probably do, unless you're vegan.
That's a fact.
That's a fact.
We get some tofu steak.
I also kind of loved his take on, it's not really necessarily like the size of the company or the series. It's kind of like where they're at with the product. Because I think we've kind of had that discussion multiple times now with like our early stage where they're like sort of hung up on like a certain number of people in the company, but sometimes the number of people in the company doesn't necessarily correlate to where they are as a business.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of insightful. I think the reasons of why you either are going to be naturally drawn to a later stage company where they have a lot of things figured out or in place, or even later than that where there's already like everything's figured out and then there's just bureaucracy on top of it. Or if you're somebody who's like really drawn to like the chaotic, risky, crazy side of things, and that possibly could change depending upon where you're at in life. The other thing that he talked about too, which I thought was really cool, is just like the not getting stuck in a job and like being okay with like going to a startup, it crashes and burns, or maybe you get fired and you go find something else that you like just the freedom and I don't know, the journey, I guess. Like, I think a lot of times there's a lot of like what you're expected to do in your career, right? Like go to a company, stay there for like 4 years, fully vest, leave, go to another place. Like he kind of shed light on a very different perspective that I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, really good insights. And I'm sure people that are either coming from bigger startups or bigger companies considering early stage startups or early engineers kind of trying to make sense of what, keeps them going with the early space. I kind of find a lot of, interest and excitement in what he shared.
It's very cool.
Andrew Munn is a senior engineering manager at Lindy.ai, where he works on building AI agents and assistants. He comes with a rich experience of 10 plus years working on building features for products and also building product teams for Nextdoor, Uber, and Facebook. Welcome, Andrew. Really excited for you to be here.
Welcome.
Thanks, Boris. Thanks, Alexis, for having me. I'm super excited to be on the chat with you. It's my first podcast.
Exciting.
I've been building product ever since I graduated college. I think I knew right away I wanted to build apps and build things for people. And so, I joined Facebook, as we called it at the time, right out of college, and was there for a couple of years and went to Uber and then a startup and Nextdoor, and then now I'm at Lindy. So that's the short.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to just ask, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, but you just covered that. So I guess the last part of that first question is, Andrew, what is the most interesting thing about you?
What is the most interesting thing about me?
People love this question.
I used to say this might still, it's very on topic, which is I went to University of Waterloo in Canada. A lot of people in the Bay Area know about the school because they have this thing called the co-op program where you do 6 internships.
Yeah.
And I think at one point I realized that I might be the only person on earth, and it's probably not true anymore, who had worked at Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook, and Google. because I did internships, all of those kind of back to back.
Yeah.
The only one I didn't go to that I kind of regret is Apple, because they have a very different culture.
That is super interesting.
Yeah.
Can you tell us the story behind what that happened on accident? Did you purposely try to kind of cover the span? And then how'd you end up at Facebook as your first full-time job?
Yeah, I think like the sort of the metagame for me at the time is that it was very hard to get your first internship at a big American tech company. So I really hustled to get a role at Amazon. And, I like asked everyone, what are the questions? What do they ask? And I got, as soon as I got that role and I tailored my resume, I was like, I'm golden. And I wanted to go experience all the big tech companies. And I think I learned a ton there from that. Like Microsoft culture could not be more different than what Facebook was like at the time. Like I'll give you an anecdote.
Yeah.
At Microsoft, I was a program manager intern.
Okay.
If I wanted to talk to a designer, so let's put it this way. If my software engineer wanted to talk to a designer, they talked to me. And then I talk to the design program manager. Then the design program manager talks to the designer.
Wow.
And also the software engineer had a designer or a software engineer in test that wrote their tests for them. So there was like 5 or 6 people. And then at Facebook, I went there and I was an intern. And they're like, hey, the Android app doesn't have a notification center. It's a web view. Can you make it native? And I'm like, what do you mean just make it native? He's like, yeah, just look at the designs on like maybe web or iOS. Just put something out there. And so I got to build and ship the native version of Facebook's notifications for Android as an intern.
Wow.
I had no idea what I was doing. And then as soon as I got back full time, and the reason I picked Facebook to go to was because they worked me by far the hardest. And they gave me by far they had the highest expectations for me of an intern. And I got to do things that impacted, hundreds of millions of users right away. So I went back full time. And as soon as I got there, they started assigning me bugs for the stuff I had built as an intern.
Oh, fun. That's so cool. So yeah, what a stark difference between Microsoft and Facebook. And was it that?
Yeah,
Facebook?
I don't think I got anything done at Microsoft the entire summer.
Fascinating.
And then they gave me a return offer and I felt like shit. I was like, I don't deserve this. I didn't do anything.
Oh no. Which I guess could be seen as a good or bad thing, if you're an intern.
No, and for me, I was like, this is not the company I want to join, right? If the bar is that low. And again, I know I'm crapping on Microsoft. This was the Steve Ballmer era. This is ancient history.
Yeah.
I think the company is different now.
It seems that way. Yeah. There's some definite good talent there. And then so Facebook was your full-time. That's where you started the full-time journey.
Yeah, I worked on Facebook Messenger specifically. It was a great experience. And I hopped over to Uber after a couple of years because the Facebook experience was super intense. We were competing against WhatsApp, which had not been acquired. And so I got, a fresh new grad out of school. I joined. They're in war mode. Facebook used to do this. We're in war mode. And they had special shuttles to take us home at midnight. So you were working there from, I think we'd get there at 10 a.m., go home at midnight.
Wow.
And they'd feed us an extra meal at 9 or 10 p.m., for the team. But kind of the wind came out of our sails because then one day they brought the whole team into a room and they're like, exciting news. We acquired WhatsApp.
I remember that actually.
And it was like, well, what the hell do we do? But I actually still work. And like Curtis, someone you interviewed last week, we met on Messenger.
Okay.
We worked together. That's how we met.
Yeah.
That's so
Awesome.
cool.
We actually have Messenger in common. When I was a recruiting manager at Meta prior to this, I was assigned to the Messenger team too, but it was all for product design. So not the actual engineering team, but it was, so random.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So you spent just under 2 years out of Facebook, just over a year at Uber, and then you joined Trove, which is, a startup in 2016, just 4 years out of college. What was like the impetus before leaving what would be considered a stable job to join something that was a little bit more uncertain, like a startup?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I actually love telling this story.
Yeah.
I'd always wanted to do a startup, but I felt that right out of school, I didn't know what I was doing. And I felt like it would probably fail because I just hadn't spent enough time building. And so I jumped ship to Uber because to me, Uber was smaller than Facebook. It was earlier stage. So I get to Uber and I was actually really surprised because it didn't feel like a smaller company than Facebook, even though it had way fewer employees. I think Uber made a mistake of actually hyper-scaling very quickly. And they hire each team, the manager, they bring in someone from Google or LinkedIn, and that person would then hire the people they knew. And so you had a bunch of different silos in the company. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think Facebook had grown by promoting people into manager roles internally. So I wasn't loving Uber. I wasn't hating it either. I met some really great people. In fact, the CEO of my current company, Flo, I met him at Uber. And, we really hit it off back then. But then my old tech lead from Facebook, this guy, John Perlow, who actually created Facebook Messenger. It was an acquisition by Facebook. It was called Beluga. It was one of the very first mobile messengers, and Facebook was scrambling. And so they acquired this 3-person company and rebranded it as Facebook Messenger. It's a very fun story. So he leaves Facebook and he messages me and he says, "Hey, I'm doing a startup. We should talk." And I say, no, John, I'm having a good time at Uber. It's not the right time. He's like, "Don't worry about it. Just come have dinner with me." And so, of course, go have dinner with him. He convinces me to sign up and join Trove, which Trove's business model basically was like Uber, but for self-storage, like real-world storage. And so we had this thesis that all these big moving companies in the world, there's dozens of moving companies in each area, like the Bay Area, for example. They have huge warehouses that are mostly empty or half empty. And we thought, what if we could go pick up people's stuff through a moving company and then store it in their warehouses that are underutilized?
Yeah.
It's like this arbitrage opportunity. We can build an app for the user, for the pickup people. And so my job at Trove was to build our app. And that was a dream of mine, which was to, from scratch, be the tech lead for an entire app from zero to shipping. And so that was awesome. I had an incredible time at Trove.
Wow, that's really cool.
So what I'm hearing is if we want to recruit you, dinner is the key to that.
Yeah, especially if it's steak.
Take you to dinner. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. We should probably just add something about like that when we're talking to people on the phone, just in a document, just to remind candidates, we'll take you to steak dinner. And then like what was the interview process like for that when you because you kind of knew somebody there, right? Like, was it a very formal interview process? Was it like straightforward because they knew you already, or how did that work out?
Okay, so in this case, I did not interview at all.
Yeah.
So it was kind of just a shoe-in. And the most of the team, we actually formed it around people that were in our network.
Okay.
We did interview a few people, and so I got to be on the other side of that.
How many people, I guess, when did you guys kind of get over the threshold of like, okay, we can build our team through like a referral network, and now we have to kind of go outside of our networks? Like, at what number employee, I guess, did that happen?
I think in terms of engineering, we only ever hired one engineer who was disconnected from the group.
Wow.
Now, some other people were like referrals.
Yeah.
So we didn't have to use like an agency. I think we may have used an agency for recruiting a designer as well, but for engineering, we didn't.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
And to be fair, we only ever got to the size of like 8 engineers.
Yeah.
Because we didn't want to grow too big. And I think ultimately Trove did not work out because it turns out we misunderstood the market, which was that it turns out all the money in self-storage, and it's a huge market, by the way, a lot of the money goes to Google because they're all bidding on ads. Oh. So when because as a user, you want self-storage, you don't know anything about the market. You just Google public storage, self-storage. There's incredible bidding on those ads. And so that we had to play in that arena. And it kind of destroyed the business model.
Fun times in startup.
Are you familiar with the saying, like, first-time founders focus on product, I guess, and second-time founders focus on distribution?
No, never heard that.
Yes. And so distribution is the idea of, like, how do you get people to use your app? And so for us, like, we didn't have a good answer to that question. And so it didn't work. But
interesting.
The best apps are inherently viral, and they have their own distribution mechanism.
Interesting. Okay.
I'm thinking about a lot of first-time founders that we're working with, and there's a ton of product focus. Yeah,
I mean, that's one thing I learned going to Trove was that my job at a small startup like 10 people, 12 people, you don't have a PM, you don't have a data analyst, you don't have strategy, you probably don't have a designer. If you do, they're focused on maybe only part of the product. So you have to do everything. You have to think about everything and be fully in the loop. And I think that's an area where I thrive. I think if I'm very siloed into one thing, which is just like you code, you take ticket, you produce code, I'm kind of miserable in that domain, which is why I think I like startups.
That's a good way to put it.
I'm curious, given your time at Trove, early startup, can you share a little bit about an exciting day in the life of early stage, a tough day in the life of early stage? What is early stage like? Yeah, I think compared to some startups, Trove was fairly stable. There was like a maturity to our leadership. I'll give that to John and Michael Powell, who are our co-founders. But I think a good day would be you're at the office 12 hours and you're hanging out with the team and you're building all day and getting a lot done. And we had some incredible offsites, things like that, where you hang out with the team for a week.
And that is very important to me when I think about a company, is like the people I work with. And I would say that it was, even though this company failed, we enjoyed working together so much that when it ultimately we learned we weren't going to be successful, we decided to stay together. And so that kind of leads into Nextdoor, because the entire team went to Nextdoor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ended up being an acquirer. I would say honestly, the worst day at Trove was the day that we called it quits.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, there's just something crazy about working your ass off for 2.5 years. And then it's like none of that mattered.
Yeah.
It's like we're throwing it all away.
Yeah.
So there's a psychological thing to that. And also, the opportunity cost, you start going through your head of like, hey, I could have worked at a big company. What if I hadn't left Uber? How are they doing? So these things very easily can get into your head.
Yeah.
I can imagine. Did you call it quits before the acquisition and then go shop and then get acquired? Or was the acquisition that, the day that was the end of the road?
We basically called it quits on trying to raise another round of funding and said, okay, what can we do? We can either all go our separate ways, but we love working together. And again, I think what we learned at Trove, and I also learned at Uber, was that those companies are not make it or break it by the software. The software is not the most important thing. It's something else. So we thought we had incredible software at Trove, but we were so proud of it. We're like, we can build so fast, we can build anything, but it doesn't matter at Trove because this is the wrong industry. So we're like, let's shop ourselves around and, let's go work at a company that needs our help. And so ultimately it came down between two companies. One was Nextdoor, and I can tell you kind of why that made sense. Another one was a Canadian company that I'm really glad we didn't join, because I think were pretty decimated by the pandemic.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. They were called Ritual, and they did like office food delivery where like people would work up. And so time frame wise, this is now early 2019, right? Early 2019. So there's no pandemic, and we're just like, great. So we did, Nextdoor ended up interviewing all of us, like doing standard loops. And that company was going through a really interesting transition, because the CEO and founder, Nirav, had just left the company, and there was a lot of shakeup. A lot of people left. Growth was slowing. And so a new CEO came in, Sarah Fryer, who had been CFO at Square. She literally went across the street in mid-market in San Francisco, because Square was on one side of the street. Nextdoor was in Twitter's building on the other side.
I remember that, yeah.
She went across the street to become CEO. And so they were looking around to acquire talent and do it quickly. And so that's where Trove came into the picture.
Interesting. So you all went over there. What was the culture like at a larger company versus what you all experienced at a startup? Did you guys stay together? Did you guys all just get distributed? What was that like?
Yeah. So we wanted to hit the ground running. And so we came in and basically became the core product team, like growth and engagement.
Okay.
And so the Trove team came in. First thing we did is we were like, hey, this Nextdoor, which is a social network, if you're not familiar with it, it's like Facebook for your neighborhood, basically. So there's a news feed, private messages. First thing we did is we said, hey, this product looks ancient. It looks ass. Like it looks like Facebook in 2009. Right. And so we came in and we're like, okay, they don't have reactions. So we built reactions. Yep. We built threaded comments. We rebuilt the news feed to look a lot better. We added video support. And so we did all that stuff in like maybe, the first quarter we were there. And we were trying to work at a tempo that was just way higher than the rest of the company. Because I think the company had gotten into a rut. I mean, we were honestly surprised by how laid back this company was at that point.
Yeah.
And a lot of the employees. Because it was like, hey, you're at a company that's not public, not profitable. Your growth is slowing. And you guys are chilling. That doesn't make sense. And so we thought, we as a team, if we stick together, we have enough critical mass so we can change the culture of this company.
Wow. And
like change the engineering. And again, there's a lot of hubris to this, right? Like it's now that I'm saying it out loud, it sounds like we're pretty high opinion of ourselves to say this.
Right.
But I had seen greatness at Meta. I had seen, or Facebook. I had seen these incredible 10x engineers and what they could do for a company. And I'm like, I don't know if that's me, but I want to pretend it is at least, and see if we can have that same impact. Yeah. To the culture.
And I guess when that makes sense, because when you're a startup, right, it is you against the world, right? And it's a small team trying to do something big and trying to do something great. And it probably feels like there are a lot of odds against you, and, good leadership will rally that. So it sounds like you had that despite things not working out. And then so it sounds like there was a lot of intention around bringing that to Nextdoor.
Exactly. And so, we were, the Trove team worked together for, I'd say, the first 6 to 9 months. And then what happened was, we all got kind of moved over into management roles and spread around the company, at least the engineering side. And over time, some people left. But for me, I had always wanted to try management at some point, because if you go back to what I said about wanting to be very well-rounded and like own everything, being a manager is a great way to do that because you can spend your time however you want and stick your fingers into whatever you want at the company. So I was excited for that. And so that's how I became a manager and stopped being a mobile engineer. But I will say, though, that after doing that for about 3.5 to 4 years at Nextdoor, I was really ready to get back into the weeds at a smaller company.
Yeah.
So what's the difference? We have people that we talk to who are working at big companies, interested in startups. We have people that are, interviewing with both early stage and later stage. What's the difference between working at a bigger company and working at a startup?
I think I would actually break it down into different categories. One, you have a pre-product market fit startup. This is a company that's searching for something that's going to explode. That's a unique experience. All right. That's where Trove was most of the time. Then you have the product market fit stage. And then you basically are scaling that as you go. Right.
Yeah.
But then of course there's always new sort of asymptotes of product market fit. In my experience at all these companies I've worked at, and I said this early on, is that Uber, despite being smaller than Facebook, felt like a bigger company. A lot of this comes down to the culture of the company.
Yeah.
You can have a pretty big company, like a 500-person company, that feels like a 50-person company, or it can feel like a 5,000-person company.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is your mileage may vary.
Okay.
But in general, at a later stage company, it's going to feel more like a public company in the sense that there's going to be a career ladder. Your role is going to be well-defined. You're going to have weekly one-on-ones with your manager. They're not going to fire you tomorrow. It's probably, if you're not performing, it could take 3 months of feedback and another 6 months. And you can probably work at most later stage companies. You probably work like a regular work week if you want, like 40 hours. Like you can balance work-life balance exists, things like that. And so in my experience, Nextdoor was pretty similar to a public company.
Yeah.
As was Uber, even by the time I joined, which was still in its sort of growth phase. They had all these things in place. But if you're an early stage company, all bets are off. You need to thrive in chaos. Like the company could completely pivot tomorrow. You could be acquired. You could be fired because the company doesn't need you anymore. There's no HR department. So you have to have a thick skin.
Yeah.
You have to do your homework. And so for me, I would never join an early stage company that I didn't know someone at or had like really good sense of like a window into that company. Like what's the truth, right? Because when you interview, people always put on their best face, right? Like what kind of people are you? And so that's, if you look at my history, I'm like, okay, I went to Trove. Well, I literally knew the founder. I knew the founder. I thought he was incredibly high integrity, and I thought he was incredibly talented.
Right.
And I wanted to work with him. And you look at Lindy, which I joined most recently, it's a generative AI company. There are thousands of generative AI companies.
Yeah.
So why did I join Lindy? It's because I know the founder, and I know their head of engineering, who I actually referred over there, who I'd worked with for 10 years across all these companies.
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of a rambling answer, but what I would say is, like big late stage companies just going to feel like you're working at a public company. But I will say the risk there too is that, okay, at Nextdoor, it's not quite a public company. I got to lead at Nextdoor the entire feed team.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was not qualified for that job. At Facebook or Instagram, there was probably 500, 5,000 people that were doing the work of a team of 20 or 30 at Nextdoor.
Yeah.
So like it's bigger, but it's still like the impact you can have is still huge.
Right.
And I would say maybe late stage companies are the sweet spot for impact because you're big enough to have a real product. And so you're actually impacting people's lives out there.
Right.
But you're not so big that you're just a tiny little cog in a big machine.
Yeah.
So you can still make big changes. So it is in that way, I think the late stage startup is this really nice sweet spot, especially if you're starting out in your career where you want a little bit of structure. Like you want a manager who knows what they're doing. You want a mentor who can teach you. You want a career path.
Right.
But you want to be able to quickly like get shit done with low bureaucracy. A lot of the time, a late stage company is great because bureaucracy just accumulates over time. And that company maybe hasn't been around long enough to accumulate more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So the way you just described working at a big company, I could see the average person associating that with, okay, there's a lot of predictability. There's a lot of stability. There's a lot of structure. You could thrive. You could make a big impact. Those all sound like great things. And then, the way you described early stage, it's chaotic, unknown, right?
Yes.
You can get fired. You can get bought. Like all these kind of crazy things could happen. Like you better know someone to kind of trust them basically. And you just went back to an early stage. So like what draws you to early stage and what's like the exciting and upside part of early stage?
I think that's exactly right, Boris. I actually think for most people, I'm in a bubble. I'm in San Francisco. It's startup heaven.
Right.
But even then, I think most people in the world, and even most people in the Bay Area, don't work for startups. They work for Oracle or Google.
Yeah.
Fair.
And honestly, the financial upside there is probably on average better. Nextdoor for me wasn't a great outcome because our stock dropped 75% after we went public.
Right.
Again, I want to caveat this, say most people probably should not join an early stage startup. You kind of have to be a bit crazy.
Yeah.
Right.
So why do I do it? And I think it's because it goes back to what do you care about in life? And I kind of just get bored at bigger companies. I like my work to be, besides my wife, Naomi, who's wonderful, I want work to be the most important thing in my life.
Yeah.
I don't have kids. I want something I can get up every day and be like, I'm doing my best work with an incredible team of talented engineers. Like I can say at Lindy that everyone I work with is incredible. You are not going to get that at a big company.
Right.
Because like I mentioned, it takes a long time for things to happen and you accumulate more people with more roles. And if you want to learn as fast as possible, small companies also, people say that, but you do learn different things at a small company versus a big company.
Yeah.
For example, at a small company, you're actually never going to learn how to build a giant distributed system.
Right.
Because you don't have a giant distributed system. Unless that's literally what your startup does, like you build a database.
Right.
But on the other hand, you're going to learn how, like I mentioned, how to do every single role in your company at a small company.
Yeah.
You do data science, engineering, design, product, strategy. You're going to think about all these things. You're going to have to build the primitives that your company uses. And it's much more green field. And so if you're an engineer, the amount of code you're writing is going to be like 5 times, 10 times more than at a giant company.
Interesting.
Like you see it. The difference in output can be incredible between someone who's meeting expectations at a big company, who makes it on a good day, they make one small change to the code base, versus a startup where they're like, okay, yeah, I pushed 1,000 lines a day,
Right.
Yeah.
And we'll hear that, right? Alexa's like, we'll hear that from candidates. So it sounds like whereas there's a lot of craziness and unknown and, perceived risk, you could also take on a way broader set of responsibilities. Sounds like the fulfillment and personal connection to the work and to the people is way higher.
Yes.
You could make a bigger impact.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've seen people that work for larger companies, say I've been here for 5 years. I want to say my work here mattered, but I'm also, it's also really tough to say that I moved the stock price, for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure is. But again, like I said, your work at a small company may also not matter if the company goes out of business.
Fair.
So
There's that.
it's high risk, high reward.
Yeah.
Fair.
But I also think it's the hardest you'll ever work in your life. And it's also the most fun you'll have. And it's kind of a paradox, but it's so true.
Yeah.
It's way more fun.
Yeah.
So a couple things I'm curious about regarding Trove. So you talked about having a friend connection there. I know you also interviewed at startups that you didn't have a direct connection with. So tell us about the breadth of your search. What all did you find attractive out there in the market? Did you end up choosing Trove because of the personal connection, or what was it that attracted you to Trove? And then the second question that maybe you can kind of parlay in that is like, how did you think about AI, given like all the kind of AI craziness that's going on in the market?
First of all, I think you mean Lindy, where I went now.
Lindy.
Yes, of course. So to hear what I'm saying is like, okay, so I took a bunch of time off after Nextdoor, and because I had never done that, and so that was a complete 180 shift for me. Right, it's not working. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would, but then I said, "Hey, okay, it's time to get a job because I'm getting bored." I had a pretty open-ended search in the sense that the size of the company was not my primary factor. It was like, does the problem they're working on speak to me?
Yeah.
I'm very mission and product focused. Some engineers want to work on the coolest engineering problems. And I see the appeal, but for me, it's like I want to work on a product that I am very personally interested in.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that as much at Nextdoor. So that's another reason I was like, okay, I want to pivot back to like something that I would use every day. I see why this is super valuable. And so I also wasn't sure if I wanted to be a manager or I wanted to be an IC, individual contributor again. And so I interviewed with some big companies like Safeties, like DoorDash and Meta, but I wasn't interested in those ultimately. I couldn't get excited about it. I talked to some early stage companies. Some of them didn't work out. They didn't want me. It wasn't the right fit, in either case. And I think ultimately how I ended up at Lindy was, like I mentioned, I knew the CEO. He had been at Uber, this guy, Flo. He's very popular on Twitter. Look him up. Flo Crivello. Yep. Great Twitter account.
I think I follow him.
And he's incredibly intelligent. He is like a thinker.
Yeah.
On Twitter, he goes viral because he has these really insightful things that he says. And I had felt like when I was at Uber working with him that I got some of that for free just by being around him, like being in his space. And I was like, he thinks that AI agents are like the most important thing that's ever happened.
Yeah.
Maybe ever, And so the idea of working on anything else was not appealing to me. Like anything outside of AI. And so I went over, and again, maybe I'm easy to convince, but I talked to him. I had actually referred over another engineer who became their head of engineering, who left Nextdoor at the same time as me. Originally, Flo had approached me for the head of engineering role, but I'm not. Again, I want to be really close to the code, and so they pitched the role to me as like, you can be your manager, but you're gonna have a small team, and like you can do a lot of coding, and that's exactly what I've been doing. So. I've been just really, really enjoying that. And I guess at that point, once I knew the people there, I knew the roadmap and what they had already built, it was hard to say no.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So AI, which you feel is super important and good thing to be investing time in, and you know the people and trust the people. So those are the two kind of big things.
Yeah, and I think the product, their specific take on it, because there's so many AI companies, like there's AI for music or AI for video and the AI for email triage. I mean, those things are all cool. What Lindy does is they're basically trying to make generalized assistants that you can build that can do anything.
Oh, okay.
And so, and it's like, I get to work on that every day and like build the primitives so that, GPT-4 can like do a whole series of actions and actually accomplish something. And when it works, it's incredible. And when it doesn't work, which is like, honestly, a lot of the time is super frustrating. So we're still super early.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
You worked at some great places, and I mean, it sounds like Nextdoor was impactful. What lessons did you learn and take with you to Lindy?
Right. And so, because like you go back and I worked at Facebook, and I think Facebook was probably the best company culture I'd ever seen to this day for a company at that scale where they were at that point. I don't know how many Facebook employees are, maybe a couple thousand at least when I was there. But I think what I learned, from Nextdoor was, like you can't rest until you've really made it, and you've never really made it. And so I think I mentioned this earlier, is the company was kind of a little too chill, I think, for its stage.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I want to make sure that I work at a company where we're no chill. We should have fun. Like, it's fun, but we're not chill. Yeah. Like, we're working really hard. We're really paranoid about our product and our fit. And another was that you have to be ruthless about talent. And I think that this is actually no longer a novel idea, because Elon Musk, famously went and basically gutted Twitter.
Yeah.
And at the time, people were saying this site's going to fall over.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. Well, guess what? Twitter's still running. There's plenty of things that I don't agree with Elon Musk. You can be like, oh, what about this? Yes, plenty. But I think he created a change in the industry, which was a realization that in any given tech company, 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people. And so I think your goal should be to create a company where you only have 20% of the people.
I love that.
Yeah.
And you might actually find that you do more than 100% of the work, because having too many people actually slows you down.
Yeah.
So that's a really important lesson. Like, small, high-performing teams will outperform a large, mediocre team any day. And that is also the only reason why startups have a chance, right? Because everyone's always like, isn't Google going to kill you?
No. Yeah.
I mean, Google hasn't killed anyone in a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Right. I love that. And it sounds like another great kind of, great reason to be part of something small where the talent density is there and
super high. Yeah.
Yeah. And the quality of talent, including the person, including you, is high enough to actually make a big impact and run a change.
And I used to be very much a believer in the metaphor that a company was like a family. But now I'm definitely on the other side, which is that the company is like a sports team, and you want to have strong performers. And it's not personal. You don't have to take it personally. Like, if tomorrow I get let go from Lindy, it's going to suck. But, I'm going to be like, look, there's probably a good reason why. Like, it wasn't, my skill set was not matching what we needed at that time. And frankly, that's a gift to me, instead of letting me linger in a role that I'm not succeeding in. And it's a gift to all the other employees who had to deal with me. If that makes sense.
I love that. Yeah. I love that.
It's an uncomfortable conversation to have, but it's, it's important.
Wise words and some real truth there.
That's awesome. So I have a couple questions too. What do you think, like, I guess if you're kind of like changing to perspective of like, now you're recruiting for a startup, but what do you think startups should do to attract good talent during the early stages of it? Like, if you were, an early stage founder and you were trying to attract talent, what do you think is like the most important thing?
That's a really good question, because a lot of the best talent is locked up at bigger companies.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, maybe you don't want those people because they're not here for the chaos that we talked about and the hard work. And then you're not going to be able to compete on compensation. Like we said, in general, early stage companies, maybe they can offer a competitive base salary, but the equity is so nebulous, right? It's like hard to compare. Yeah. So you have to go and find these people who are either super mission driven by what you're doing or the people who don't even know that working at your company is an option.
Yeah.
And so at Lindy, a lot of our best talent are these people who were off doing something in the computer science world, but they didn't really think of San Francisco or joining like a big tech. They were like, they didn't think that was a thing.
Yeah.
One of our best engineers we recruited him when I think he was 17 years old.
Oh, wow.
He was a maintainer of an open source library, and Flo reached out to him on GitHub and was like, "Hey man, you want to work for us?" 17, he starts working for us. I mean, imagine you're like still in high school, right? And it's just incredible. So a lot of people, we found them by looking at who were contributing to the open source libraries we were using, people who were on, Slack groups that were interested in these things. And, Flo also cultivated his Twitter brand, right? So we get tons of inbound because of his Twitter.
Yeah.
And people, they're inspired. They want to work at Lindy because they're excited about AI. So I think recruiting in AI is probably about the easiest thing you can recruit in. Like if you're doing B2B SaaS, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's tough.
I don't have a good answer for that.
There's other industries that I can think of at the top of my head that I'm like, no, I don't I don't want that. But
but there really is. I think that it's a mistake as a startup founder or a manager to go after people who are very happy at big companies.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to be happy you can't compete with them on their current comp. And it turns out they're not even going to perform very strongly when they join.
Yeah.
Because they're trained in a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah. I see it both ways. I think that there's a subset of people from those companies that are slowly coming to the conclusion that they hate what they're doing and want to do that stuff.
Yeah, that's good. And that's the case.
Yeah.
Go for them. Because that's an opportunity. That was me. So, no, I didn't hate Nextdoor, but I was ready for something smaller again.
Yeah.
So.
But then I think that there's got to be a stepping stone, right? You can't just go from Meta to, a 3-person startup. There's got to be maybe try a Series C as a bridge between maybe progressively work smaller.
Because you can learn what you like. And another thing to think about too is Lindy is very purposely an in-person company.
Yeah.
And what's funny about this is that before Lindy, the founder, Flo, was doing a company called Team Flow, which was one of these newfangled remote work companies.
Yeah.
It was a remote office where you could move your avatar around a map. And they did a 180-degree pivot, pivoted from Team Flow to AI, pivoted from 100% remote team to 100% in-person team.
Yeah.
And it was you were literally building a product for remote work and then decided, no, actually remote work is a mistake. Let's do in-person. Kind of crazy.
Yeah.
That is pretty crazy. But such is the world. Yeah, such is the world.
Yeah.
And so I think having a brand, right? So our brand is we work hard, we have a high talent density, and we're in person.
Yeah.
So if that sounds good to you, we'll be honest about the things that are not good.
Mm-hmm.
Like at Lindy, for example, we'll tell people that we have high expectations, and so we may fire you quite quickly if you're not up to. But the thing is, it's a filter that works for our advantage.
Yeah,
honestly, because if that sounds crazy to you, maybe that's a hint you shouldn't join.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot too. Sometimes I'll know somebody right away isn't the right fit, and I'll tell them very quickly here's why I think that this might not be an attractive role for you. And then all of a sudden I find that it sells them even harder. What's happening here? It's some reverse psychology.
We call this the reverse sell. Yeah. The anti-sell.
Yeah.
And I've done this. I did this a lot at Nextdoor, right? We were at the offer stage with someone. I get on the phone and I'm like, look, man, this is going to be a tough job. Yeah. Here's all the things that are wrong on the team. Here's what the team has to deliver. Yeah. Here's what you're missing. Yeah. And if they came out of that conversation smiling and excited, I'm like,
all right,
we got to win.
Hell yes, let's go.
Yeah. That's funny. Okay, cool. And then I guess on the reverse side of that, what do you think early engineers looking to do early stage, what do you think they should be looking for in a startup? What should be top of mind for them?
I think so I'll touch on what I said before is, try to figure out if you can validate through the back door somehow if this is a good company with good people with high integrity. Yeah. I think that's super important. I can't tell you how many friends I've known who joined a startup and it was, can I say the shit show in one way or another. Yeah. Right. And so that's important. And you can do your work, do your homework. You have negotiating power. Yeah. I think people, especially young people, when they're looking to join a company, they don't realize how much power they actually have and how flexible everything is. You can keep talking to them. You can have more meetings. You can push back deadlines. Mm-hmm. You can figure these things out. When you're interviewing with someplace, you should go in with the mindset that you're not just being interviewed, you're interviewing them.
Yes.
Right? Really take advantage of that 5 minutes at the end to ask questions. And frankly, you should be if you go to the next stage, you should be setting up more interviews to ask more questions and meet the team.
Yeah.
That will paradoxically make that company want you a lot more if you're very enthusiastic about it.
Yeah.
So they'll give you more leverage. And then there's the question of, okay, should you join a company that's pre-market fit or post-product market fit? I mean, look, all else being equal, definitely post-product market fit. That's a huge filter. Yeah. But again, product market fit is a gradation. There are levels to it. You can peter out at any time.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of companies that just, they did a SPAC or they did an IPO. Some of them have already gone out of business in the last few years, right? And so there's no guarantees in life, especially early on. These things change so quickly.
Yeah.
But I think, again, if you join a company that's pre-PMF, you should try to set deadlines for yourself for reevaluating, how long you're going to stay there. Because because you may be signing yourself up for being in the desert, as they say, for multiple years, which can be frustrating. Yeah. If you're not the founder, you don't necessarily owe anyone that you do that. It's fine if you do and if you're enjoying it and you're still learning. Yeah. But you should also feel comfortable moving to a new company. One of the things that makes America special versus a lot of our peers in the Western world is it's very easy to change companies here. It's easy to be let go and it's easy to change companies and it's encouraged. It's okay. Yeah. And I think that creates a dynamic economy. And I think that's one thing that's very special.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I don't disagree. Let's see here. Okay, so next questions. So we stalked your Twitter account and found a few of your pet peeves. And so we're going to do a special segment called Andrew, Why Do You Hate This?
Oh boy.
So number one is grapefruits.
I know. I don't hate grapefruit. I think, actually, they're not my favorite fruit.
Okay.
My problem with grapefruit is very clear, is the name. It makes no sense. Fruit. We already have a fruit called grape. Yeah. I think I tweeted about this, and I think if we named other things like we named grapefruit, like steak would be called like chicken meat or something, right? If we called beef chicken meat, that would be absurd. Yeah. But the good news is the wonderful country of France has the word pamplemousse, which is grapefruit. Pamplemousse is a beautiful word. It is a beautiful word. I think that we should adopt it in the English language to replace grapefruit.
I love it.
Yeah, I think LaCroix did that.
They did. LaCroix, honestly,
I think did that wonderfully. And yes.
I saw this on a bottle of LaCroix. That's what started the chain of thought in my head.
Deep thoughts.
Deep thoughts by Andrew Munn.
Yeah. Okay, how about coffee stir sticks? And actually, before I think I know why this is annoying, but I want to hear why you think it's annoying too.
Coffee stir sticks. Okay, so I think is every company's micro kitchen has coffee stir sticks, right? Yeah. And they have a purpose, or every hotel. But they're actually useless because what you do is, if you're putting cream into your coffee, is you put the cream in the cup first. Yeah. And you pour the coffee on top of the cream and it automatically mixes. Yes. You don't have to do anything. Let's change your life. Yeah. Actually, coffee stir sticks have one actual legitimate purpose. They are chopsticks. And so, because your office may not have chopsticks. And so if you want to eat a bag of chips and you don't want to get your hands dirty, yes, you take this coffee stir sticks and you eat your chips with chopsticks. I actually do this all the time. People would see this at work and they start copying me. And so I was like, okay, this is my biggest innovation. Yeah. We actually, Boris, we used to do this in Bink LA too, to not get Cheeto dust on your fingers. I started doing it and people were laughing at me, but it's true. It's gross. Wow. Yeah. Wait, we're using coffee stir sticks specifically for this? No, I actually next level, I was using a fork. I was just, Cheeto, getting the Cheeto in between the prongs and using it that way. Yeah, that works. Yeah. But by any means necessary to just not have Cheeto dust on your hands. Anyway, not that I eat a lot of Cheetos, but when I do. No. I'm a stress eater. So at work, I just, snacks. It's like hard problem. Oh boy, I better get a bag of chips. Yeah. All right. Google Photos. Oh, I don't remember this. This was, what did I tweet? This is all new. I like this. Yeah. It's like a blast. I'm really curious. Yeah. I probably didn't tweet for 10 years. And so I wonder if the dates on these tweets are 2013 or something. Who knows what you said back in 2013. Yeah.
The internet is forever.
Exactly. I thought I deleted all my tweets, because I was worried. I was like, when everyone was getting canceled. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know what I wrote when I was 19. Yeah. Who knows? So,
okay. Okay. I'm going to read a tweet. You guys try to guess who said it. Okay. Okay. Google Photos lacks the ability to flip a mirrored selfie. It's such a glaring omission. It's honestly hard to believe it.
That's right.
Who said that?
Okay, I do remember this now. That was me.
Okay.
I see.
Okay, so do you understand this? Which is like when you take a selfie, the phone mirrors the image, and I wanted to flip it back. And I was on my Android phone, and I was like, I have been an Android engineer for 10 years.
Yeah.
I cannot figure out how to flip a photo on my phone. Like, literally cannot mirror the photo.
You know why I don't understand it? Because I'm like a hardcore iPhone user. And I know I don't know. I hope that's not like a controversial subject.
No.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you know if you can do this? And the only reason you would want to do this is if there's text. You take a selfie and there's text, and you want to make sure the text isn't backwards. So you will flip it. And so iPhone also mirrors all selfies by default. And so I don't know.
Interesting.
They both do it, and it's because you look like in this podcast when we're looking at it ourselves. We're looking at a mirrored image. It's not what the other person is seeing.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
And it's because people's faces are not symmetrical, and they're used to looking at themselves in the mirror, and you feel like you look wrong if you see a non-mirrored image of yourself.
That's interesting. I've never thought about that before, ever.
Yes.
Mind is blown right now.
Who knew? We're going to start a new segment called Who Knew with this episode.
Who knew? I didn't know.
As long as no one facts, this is a podcast, so hopefully everything I said was true.
Yeah. We don't employ fact checkers, so you're okay.
No fact checkers.
No.
So thank you again, Andrew, for spending time with us, giving us a glimpse into the world of very high visibility, large companies and early stage startups. As we close, where can people find you? Anything that you want from our listeners? How can anyone help who's listening?
Well, you can find me on Twitter, apparently, with some good takes at, Andrew Munn.
Some great takes.
And I'm always open. You can find me on LinkedIn. And look, if after listening to this conversation, you're interested in working at Lindy, definitely reach out.
Yeah.
I love that.
If I didn't scare you off, if you're excited, you're like, hell yeah, let's go build AI agents and change the world. Then come reach out.
Anti-sell for the win.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks for having me. It's been so much fun.
Yeah. Hope you had a great time.
I did.
All right.
Bye.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. Do let us know what you thought of our episode on our Twitter or LinkedIn. Look for the links in the show notes. Both Alexis and I are not professional podcasters, as I'm sure you could tell. We just love talking about early stage startups.
And if there's a recruiting related question you'd like answered, or you could use help with anything hiring related, jump on our website. It's www.first10.com. That's 1st10.com. And we'll do our best to get that answered for you.
Thank you so much for staying with us till the end. My name is Boris, and with me is
Alexis Munger.
And we'll see you next time on the First 10 Podcast.
Bye.